Thanks, Suzanne. And first, a denial. It's not down to me that we're European Green Capital. I've been involved as a activist in the city for many, many years. And but it's down to all those activists. It's down to now the Green Capital Partnership, which is a partnership of 800 organizations. And I always say this is a city, this is a great city in spite of its leadership. It's a great city because it's got people who take initiatives, and it's the individuals who take the initiatives that make a good place. And I think that applies to everywhere, and my job is to enable. And it's quite nice to start with this rather pretty view of Bristol. It's a pretty view, but it also, I think, expresses what a complex city it is. And yet this is only a little bit of the central-ish part. I mean, Clifton was a suburb on the outskirts of Bristol in the 18th and early 19th century. And yet, when I came to Bristol in 1965, and I did arrive in a car, I'm ashamed to say. I arrived in a car that I bought for a tenner. It was an old 1934 Morris 8. It was before MOT. It was before we had tests and cars, and you could just drive anything that went on the road. And it was open, and I was a student, and I was a popular student because I could pile loads of people into my car because it was an open car. And anyway, I arrived in Bristol, and I thought, wow, what a brilliant city. I'd never really lived in a big city. I had lived in Oslo for a time, but other than that, I'd never lived in a big city. I'd always travelled, no fixed abode. And so I immediately got attached to this city. And yet, very soon after that, I discovered there were plans to demolish the whole of that hillside here, to build more blocks of flats like this, but much taller here, 3 across this hillside, with escalators that ran up to Clifton. It was so convenient. And then there was a plan for an urban motorway that had a sort of spaghetti junction here that went over where the SS Great Britain is, so that the council actually didn't want the SS Great Britain to come back here because it would have got in the way of their highway plans. This was only a little bit of a plan that then it went shooting over the river here, over the floating harbour as we call it, up the side of a park, went just crashing across Bristol. As an architecture student, whose first book that he read in architecture school, and I mentioned it last night, was Jane Jacobs, this was provocation. And so I suppose that shows you a bit of why I got very involved in Bristol's future. So when we received the Lewis Mumford Award, I took that as a wonderful honour, but also as a duty. And I think every time that any city is given any honour of any sort, we should take it as a challenge. And so, Suzanne, I take that as a challenge that, yes, we are working to enhance streets for social life and celebration for pedestrians, bicyclists, public transport, and reducing the negative impacts of the car. We're working for it, but we haven't got there yet. And I think that is the huge challenge. And I see as my allies the young people. I was joking last night, there's a collective noun for cynics, for people who dislike change. It's adults. And children are really open to this change, and they get it. They don't drive cars yet, which helps. And so I think it's through the schools and through children and through play that we really make the change, because that's not waiting for a generation. They do become the educators. They take this stuff home. So the Healthy School Awards that I've initiated, I think, is a really important part of driving this change in the city. And we are now, through our European Green Capital status, creating what will become a national programme for schools, which we are testing in Bristol. It's now engaged 10,000 of our primary school children on a sustainable education program. And that is absolutely central to making a healthy city. As part of that program is when I stood and decided that cheekily that I could be the mayor of Bristol without having a political party. One of my sort of most tangible promises, because I try not to make too many promises because I thought they'd be hostages to fortune, but one of my most tangible promises is that we get every primary school child that's up to the age of 11 to plant a tree. Since and relatively recently, I was contacted by an Australian organisation called One Tree Per Child, that's driven by an environmentalist called John Dee in Australia, together with Olivia Newton-John, which maybe opened my eyes, or at least opened the envelope. And we have now started what we hope becomes a real global movement for 1 tree per child for every child up to the age of 11, depending on the education program in the areas. And I think a good city is not just a city that does good within its city. A good city is a generous city, one that shares, but probably also steals. And so I'm all for the sharing of ideas, which is why this conference is so valuable. Establishing ourselves as the European Green Capital was also a primary aim of mine, knowing that we had worked for it. This was the 3rd time of trying, that we'd been shortlisted, and I was absolutely determined that we got there, and with the help of many, many others, we did. And this is the Director General, 3rd from left and the forefront, the Director General of the European Commission, cycling from Brussels a couple of weeks ago to the awards that awarded the 2017 Green Capital, Essen in Germany. I think what was lovely about that is he came on that cycle route that we first built, the Bath-Bristol cycle route, that was on an old railway line that we first built in the late 70s, early 80s, started by an engineer in Bristol, John Grimshaw, who is one of the examples of those people who just get up and do stuff. As a result of us building that cycle route, which I came on in advance of them because they were late, and I couldn't wait, that resulted in thousands of miles of national cycle routes across the country, probably what is a £250 million project across the country, probably more now, and yet a flea bite when it comes to the amount of infrastructure expenditure that we spend in any city on roads, or on any city region on roads, and yet that covers the whole of the United Kingdom and is transformational. I like to feel that we're a city where people like to relax, and that this is a working day, and it's on working days that people need to be able to experience the city as outside their place of work as well. So places of work should never be sheds in car parks. They should, and places of work too often have become business parks that are sheds in car parks. And to my mind, it's really important that we integrate all city life as closely as possible together for a healthy city. So now I come back to a medieval map. And I think this is where every European city starts. It's complex. Not many of those buildings still exist. There are a few remains. But what does exist is that street pattern. And I think we have a huge responsibility when we are creating new places to recognize that the buildings that we create may not be there. But once you set down a street pattern, unless you absolutely blitz a place all at once, that street pattern carries on forever. And that makes it a real challenge when it comes to contemporary transport solutions, and certainly a real challenge when it comes to coping with the automobile that has dominated so many of our cities. And now it's become that very complex city. You can see some of those earlier houses, but it's a hugger-mugger of stuff. And Sir John Summerson, who was the curator of the Soane Museum in London, one of my favourite museums. If anybody's not been there, get to the Soane Museum. But Sir John Summerson, now dead, said, if I was to take a foreigner to any one city in England, I wouldn't take them to a city where the same thing happened over a short period. I would take them to Bristol. I would take them to Bristol because everything has happened. And everything has happened, both good and bad. And so Bristol is a great place to come and study the British city. We have our challenges. We have our challenges in these times, big challenges in these times, because we have less resource. And since 2007, 2008, there's been absolutely diminishing funds for us to run a city with. We're very centrally governed in this country, and we have a very strong city-region devolution agenda now, which I'm discussing with the government and taking a bit of a lead on with the 8 English core cities, the cities of 500,000 or more outside London, plus Glasgow and Cardiff. And we have a challenge because we have very, very diverse cities. I think it's a great challenge. Bristol has had a huge amount of immigration over the last 15 years. When I arrived in Bristol, it was a diverse city, but not as anywhere near as diverse as it is 50 years on. And so we have about 450,000 people. We have an urban area that is bigger than that. There's about 600,000 people. We're about the 7th or 8th largest city in the UK, depending how you measure it. And we have 91 languages. We have all colours and creeds, and a huge Somali-born population, which is relatively new. And I think that these aspects enrich the city, but they also put huge pressures on us in terms of housing and the affordability of housing in particular. Because if you live in a relatively wealthy city, and we're the only city outside the southeast of London, outside the London aura in England, that punches above the national average economically, although that's a very crude measure, and we all want to measure in a better way in terms of happiness and well-being and everything. The fact is we're a relatively wealthy city, but we have some very, very severe areas of poverty. And if you're poor in a rich city, your housing costs more and you have less left to eat and for the essentials of life. So if you're poor in Liverpool, for instance, your housing probably costs half as much and you have more left, because poverty is roughly the same in a poor area of Bristol as poverty is in a poor area of Liverpool. But as I say, it enriches Bristol. We like to feel we are a city of fun. And when we were awarded Green Capital, that is the label that was put on us by the European Commissioner, that it goes to the city with a sense of fun. I like to feel that that was because Liz Zeidler is here, and I and those of us who presented to the European Commission did so with a sense of fun. While we took the issue seriously, I think fun is a very serious issue. I think fun is the way of getting through to people. Fun is the way of educating people. And it's really important that what we do is always with a sense of fun. Now, sometimes it can be inappropriate, but generally it is the best way of breaking through barriers. It's the best way of breaking through those prejudices that people have. And we're a very foodie city now. And I couldn't have said that when I arrived 50 years ago, when it was pretty base in terms of the food offer. Now we have a very rich, and we're the home of organic food through the Soil Association. We're the home of hundreds of food growing organizations. We're not yet Havana, but I would like us to be a city that grows much more of its food within the city and has a much stronger relationship, which we're developing with the surrounding countryside. Because there's a structural problem in dealing with that issue, where 80 to 90% of the food that is sold in this country is sold through now half a dozen, it was 4, but it's now 2 German supermarkets as well. So through half a dozen major supermarket brands, we sell nearly 90% of our food, and the farmers provide all that food. So that we're fighting back to make that local connection, and street life, the markets, small independents, and an increasing amount of restaurants that will only access their food. Obviously, their wine comes from further afield sometimes, but that will only access their food from within 50 miles of the city, and that has become a huge driver for change. Anyway, I come back to Jane Jacobs. I think what I would put the emphasis on this quote is about the importance of people with different purposes planning and contriving outside the formal framework of public action. And that comes back to enabling and being tolerant and being and giving people the tools for change. Now I fly over Bristol in a balloon occasionally, and I find we are a centre of ballooning. Thanks to Don Cameron, a great balloonist who based himself here, a Scotsman. We put up with him, and and it's a wonderful way of understanding the city, and it's also a great joy doing it. But we are a city that is largely made up of streets and small family houses, and I think that makes street life so important, and nearly all those streets you're looking at are filled with cars, dominated by cars. They're not accessible enough to children to play in. But post-war, what we did is we knocked down many of those streets, and we rehoused people in the 50s, 60s, in the suburbs, in places like this. It's a particularly cruel photograph because I wanted to take a cruel photograph. But the fact is that 20% of the city now live in places that you probably wouldn't choose to live, and that they've lost that sense of community that we now need to regain. And post-war, we allowed the city just to fill up with cars, and because we developed with supermarkets that were not in streets but remotely in big car parks, and we developed monocultures of people living in one place, working in another, shopping in another, having leisure in another, the car became the solution, and we've now become dependent on it. And it is my absolute determination to deal with that gets me the most of my hate mail. And we first have to deal with it by infrastructure. I'd say we first have to. I think that there's so many eggs we have to lay, and so many chickens that have to lay the eggs, that it's a complex business. There's no silver bullet. We have to work on every single front. But the fact is that we have to improve the public transport system. You can't improve the public transport system when you've got all the roads clogged up with cars unless you separate it completely. We haven't got the money to provide a tram system. We are providing a bus rapid transport, metro bus system that goes north-south, east-west, and is a £200 million project, and then we are spending another £200 million on reviving our rail network. Basically, it's making the most of what we've got. And I think that's a principle that in a city that's challenged with resource, that is what you've got to do. And actually, it's a very, very healthy attitude. You cannot throw hundreds of millions at solutions in a provincial city of this sort in this country in the way we're financed. And so we have to do it through behavioural change, but the nudges sometimes are bigger nudges than others, and I think that having bus rapid transport will be a major nudge that will change the way people move around the city considerably, or will contribute to it. in the next couple of years. So what we're doing is trying to get rid of as many roundabouts as possible. So we will get rid of that huge roundabout by the station and various other places, get rid of the roundabout next to St Mary Redcliffe. It was very silly to build such a beautiful church on a roundabout. And tame the city as much as possible. But I really just want to say how we've got to educate people to accept that change, or sometimes just force the change in order to open people's eyes as to how that change will benefit their lives. I have sold my car. I only cycle. I think that we are getting a huge number of people now cycling, families and children. We've got a lot of cycling projects within the schools. We are recycling cycles, and particularly in our prison, which is one of the major occupations for prisoners in the city, and so that we can sell them cheaply to people who can't afford decent bikes. And we are the cycling city of the UK, in spite of being topographically challenged, which we are, with a lot of hills. We've got a lot more electric bikes now, and I encourage that. Some people sneer at electric bikes. I said, absolutely, I've got an electric bike, which I now regard as my car, which I only use maybe the most 7 or 8% of the time, and the most of the time I use a push bike now. But the electric bike will get me across the city without arriving at meetings in a terrible wreck in a sweat. I think, and we approach the whole issue with a sense of fun. We had a naked. I wasn't on it. We had a naked cycle ride last weekend, which was very popular, and I kept as far away as I could. And not all the sites were as aesthetic as that. And I gather. And we also had a Grand Prix in the centre of the city, the first one we've had, which was a figure of 8, which worked absolutely beautifully, because what a wonderful thing about a city in levels, you can actually have people going up and over, and it's I think each one of these things matters, because each one does leave a legacy. Each one encourages the 8,000 or 9,000 people who came on the Sky Ride that we had, which was a family fun ride, only on the same weekend, as part of Big Green Week. There's a language problem, though. An awful lot of what the measures we do sound negative. Road closed is an extraordinary negative statement. That road is open to people. And so I'm trying to change the signs. But then I have problems with the Department for Transport, who say, no, people won't understand that, which is why we had to make these signs visual. But I do think in so many ways, to make a healthy, accessible city, we need to get that positive message about change, rather than it looking as if it's something that you're stopping, which, of course, is how it is read by so many people who are holding on for dear life to their steering wheel. So Make Sunday Special was something I brought in, and again, it was something that I heralded before I came in, because I thought it was a simple thing to do, was open streets for people, firstly in the city centre, which we've done, which has now got huge demand for us to permanently open streets to people in the medieval city centre. So when you go into the old city, that will, in the next year or two, because of the legal complications that it takes. I envy Jamie Lerner, who was just able to say, do it, and you've got a new park, do it, and you've got a new street, promenade or whatever. Somehow the bureaucracy in this country doesn't now allow me to use the Brazilian methods. And but this, in a way, is my shortcutting to the Curitiba way of doing things, and we have somebody from Curitiba here, don't we? Yes. Hail Curitiba. And it just opened people's eyes. I think it's so important. While this is an event, it's so important we use events to manage change, and that we let our kids absolutely free to do what they want, because it all washes off. We had bicycle races. Actually, I think we had electric bike races up this street at the time. An artist called Luke Jerram, who's a Bristol artist. He's the guy who created the idea of pianos across cities, table tennis across cities, and which is now something that's happened across the world. Remember, it started in Bristol, and musical clouds flying across cities. And so Luke said to me one day that he wanted to take advantage of the fact that I'm open to opening streets. And so he said, why not a water slide down Park Street? And if you go, I think some of you have walked down or up Park Street where the museum was up at the top, and it was tremendous. We had something like 100,000 applications to do it, but we could only get a few hundred down in the day. So there's enormous scope for those sort of events that give an excuse to disrupt the city, and disruption sometimes necessary to make people realize. We're leading the way as a city, and I take my hat off to the previous administration who started this. I never make that excuse when people attack me for it, because I'm proud of it. That I've now driving this 20-mile-an-hour limit right across the city. So 80% of our streets, all the residential streets, any street that's anywhere near a school, 80% of the streets now have reduced from 30 mile an hour to 20 mile an hour. I get a huge amount of people who shout out of their car windows at me when I'm trying to exceed 20 on my bike, and which I can easily do going down Park Street. But again, the kids get it. And this is really important. And now the government is really latched onto this and now is really encouraging people. There's 7 times the chance of killing a child or in an accident if you're going at 30 than there is at 20. That's a remarkable figure. And I was behind a cab driver the other day who was going well within the 20-mile-an-hour limit, and I was thinking how good he was. And then he turned, and to my horror, against the path of a woman cycling up the street. And I don't know whether he was on his phone or something, but he knocked her off. And she went flying, but actually she was all right. And I said to him, "You're really lucky. You were good, actually. You were going within the 20 miles an hour. I don't know what you were doing, not watching, but you were really lucky you didn't kill that woman. And I hope you go and tell every single cab driver in this city that 20 miles an hour has saved you a terrible, terrible guilt." And he took it to heart, so I hope he has. But 20 is not just about slowing down cars. It's about encouraging more people to walk. It's about improving. It's about calming our neighborhoods and our communities, which it absolutely does. It's about getting more people to walk to school. It's about encouraging the use of local shops rather than the big remote stores. And it is working. And what's remarkable about it is you don't get around the city any slower going at 20 than you did at 30 because the junctions work more smoothly. And it's a big health issue, and it's one that is absolutely proving its case. And it's worth the flack to put up with it. But another big challenge is that we have filled our streets with cars, stationary cars parked all day. Our residential areas have become commuter car parks for people working in or around the centre of the city. And it was completely unacceptable. And we as a city have been extremely slow or timid at dealing with it. There was one area that had been done in, and then it come to a complete grinding halt. So I said to my to my director of transport, let's just do it and widespread. And so we aim to bring in 24 areas of residence parking. And the reaction was very fierce. I promise you. And they brought out coffins. You're going to kill the area. Clifton will die. And I said, this is not very good marketing for the area you're trying to save. Anyway, I slightly amended it, and I've now got the 14th or 15th residence parking area coming in. These are the areas, and now the pressure is building on those areas that I left out, saying, please, can you come and declare our area a residence parking zone as well? People pay under £50 a year. It's peanuts if you're running a car, but they still complain. And they complain until it happens. And now it's happened. Those guys, or at least the people they represent, are now stopping and shaking my hand in the street and saying, thanks, sorry, we got it wrong. And that's so sometimes democracy isn't just about listening to every loud voice. And that is really important. That sometimes I rather whimsically said that I listen to the voices I don't hear, but that's that was a mistake. I listen to those quiet voices, but nevertheless, you've also got to listen to your own judgment, I think, and learning. I've learned off so much of other European cities, and I've seen what's happened, and Bristol isn't that different, that it doesn't work here while it does work there. And I think it's just having the courage of your convictions and not always thinking about whether you're going to get re-elected, because that doesn't get you anywhere. I have an ambition that we create, that streets don't necessarily mean streets with cars. This actually is a scheme for a little bit of the Bristol Bath cycle path. So the cycle path isn't an isolated path, though it becomes a populated place, and your garage is a cycle store, and you have cycle families. And this is something that would be pretty normal in the Netherlands, but is not normal in the UK. We are developing quite commercial areas as well. This is the area around the station. I think it could be hugely improved, and we are setting about to make this into much less of just a commercial area, but a place that is very, very mixed use, so that it becomes a place to live, a place for leisure, a place for all activity, as well as a working place. But the station was built well outside Bristol by Brunel, the Great Western, when he brought the Great Western Railway Company to Bristol. And he wanted to bring it right into the city harbour, right into here, actually, just over there. And then he was going to have a hotel that welcomed people from the train, got out into a hotel room, spent the night there, and then transferred into the Great Western or the SS Great Britain and sailed across New York. So there's a missing mile now in Brunel's dream of the great journey from London to New York. And so that the station was rather desolate and just grew rather secondary businesses around it. The other side of the town that was called Redcliffe, that's got this wonderful church, St. Mary Redcliffe. And it's now become the great opportunity for regeneration that we have created this enterprise zone, which we actually share with the 3 surrounding authorities. It's so it serves the metropolitan area, and this was an early sketch of how we get rid of the huge great roundabout that I was talking about that's on this side of the station, that we redirect the station so that when you come out of the station, you're facing the city, you're using the old passenger shed that Brunel created, and so that it has much more relevance to the sort of arrival in Beirut 25 years ago experience that you get now. And that's being very rude to Beirut, really. But so this is a wonderful opportunity for regeneration and applying all the principles. And one of the opportunities is that we're creating, and there was another promise I made. I tried not to make promises, I said, but another promise I made, that we deliver an entertainment, music and sports arena for 12,000. This was an architectural competition we held, because I think it's if you are producing some major new infrastructure, major new a major new building, that it's important that you involve the rest of the world in it. And what was lovely about it, we shortlisted these 5 out of about 40 applications from practices that were capable of building arenas. And 2 of them, one was from Spain, one from Sweden, 3 were from the UK, because that was probably the weight of the applications for the... And the best one, even though it was completely anonymous, the best one was the one that was from Populous, who created the Olympic Arena in London, the Olympic Stadium in London, a great, but working with 2 local practices, the engineering practice, Biro Happold, great practice, and Field and Clegg Bradley, who some of you will have heard of in Bath, who are also a great practice. So actually we held an international competition, and 2/3 of the design team, completely coincidentally, because it absolutely won on merit, is local, and that is great. So don't be afraid of international design competitions. So that becomes very much a generator for the development around Temple Meads, instead of it just being an office park. And that is attracting a huge amount of interest from developers to create a place rather than just a series of buildings. And the sustainable issue around it is that I'm absolutely refusing to put a great big car park. And the point of, because nearly every arena comes with a 2,000 or 3,000 space car park, because this is for 12,000 people. And what do you get? You get a huge, your experience of going out for the night is you get a huge traffic jam going into your car park. You get a huge traffic jam coming out of it. And so we want to be clever with it. We want to apply all the smart city principles that we're applying to try and make all this agenda work. We've gone into partnership with the university with a great project called Bristol is Open, which is opening at least 200 data sets that we have in the city to enable people to come, companies to come. We've got NEC, we've got Guangzhou City, we've got others coming and working with us on the Bristol is Open project, which is probably the most ambitious open data project in the world that's being run by any city, making use of the spare supercomputer that the university have, and of course making use of their brain power. And so a little application for that is to have an app that enables everybody to find the best way of arriving at the arena, and that some will come by car, some will share their cars, but people will come by train if they're sensible, or by the rapid bus transport, or whatever it may be. But we should be so much smarter about the way we travel, and that's about getting the right information, because we're very dumb cities at the moment. And we're dumb cities because this city, it is improving, but 90%, when I became mayor, 90% of the cars driving into the city every morning, 60,000 of them, were driver only. Well, that is stupid. And so, apps, smart cities, smart city applications can help with that. I know people, it's a term that's bandied about, but I think it is about being clever rather than just thinking infrastructure is always the solution. I think it is about what I started with. It's about making the most of what you've got. And so this gives you just a little picture of the vibrant, young Bristol, the healthy Bristol. I've got a long way to go. I want to involve our kids much more in the future of their own city. I want every single officer, every single person making a decision in this city, think about, how is this going to improve the life of a child? How is this going to make a safer place? Whether you're making decisions about housing, about roads, about food, or whatever decision you're making, being driven by a very, very simple single message. Is this making us a more child-friendly city? Because if we do, we make it a much more friendly city for everybody of whatever age. So that's a little feel of where I'm trying to go, and what is the city but the people, as Shakespeare said in Coriolanus. Thank you.